Thank you for joining us on this episode of Legal Angle with Emmanuel, the law Olawale. I have two guests with me today, and these two guests are people that I really respect professionally and personally. They are prosecutors with over 20 years of experience. Bill Edrick, he just retired in February of this year after spending about 25 years prosecuting misdemeanor cases. And I have Scott Kirschman. He's a prosecutor with over 20 years experience. And even just this week, he had a murder trial. So he's still up and running, prosecuting cases. He only prosecutes felony cases. Welcome to the show, Bill and Scott.
Hello.
Thank you.
And today we're going to be talking about prosecutors and their relationship with the community. Everyone sees prosecutors as the protector of the community, prosecuting crimes, finding justice for victims, and making sure there is a kind of equilibrium between the community and the police and victims and criminals. But prosecutors have a unique role, and we can't do without prosecutors. And I have these two gentlemen who have been one of the pillars of Franklin County community. So we'll be talking about their role and the relationship the office needs to have with the community. So I'm going to start off with Bill. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself and your choice of career?
Okay. I originally came from a small town in southern Indiana. I was the first member of my family to go to college. I didn't plan on becoming a lawyer. I went to junior college. I had a degree in business administration. I actually planned on being an accountant. Then I got a bachelor's degree from Purdue University in secondary education. And then I did another career change, and I actually became an academic librarian. So I'd have master's in library science. While I was a librarian, I also got a master's degree in history. And then 3 years in, I decided I wanted to go to law school. So I went to law school. My dream was I was going to be a big civil rights attorney. I hoped to practice employment discrimination and those types of things. So I was going to be one of these attorneys who's going to completely change the world when I entered the legal profession. Um, Went to law school. It was a big adjustment to go to law school from the other academic programs I was in. While I was in law school, I started working at the Columbus City Attorney's Office, and I took a turn. And I really enjoyed working at the city attorney's office. First, I did mediations, and then I helped victims of crime file charges or make referrals to services as a student employee. When I got past the bar exam, Janet Jackson hired me as an assistant city attorney. I then went on to work in the office for 25 years. I was a courtroom prosecutor, the environmental prosecutor. I was the chief of staff, the deputy chief prosecutor, and the chief prosecutor. So I assumed most titles that existed in the office. The bulk of my career was under city attorney Rick Pfeiffer. I served as his courtroom prosecutor for 3 years when he was the environmental judge. And then I was sort of one of his right-hand people when he was in office. So I think a lot of my community outreach and how to do things were greatly influenced by him, because he was very much involved in getting into the community. If he had a hearing and he wanted to know what was going on at a property or a house or whatever, we would go into the community. He actually did court hearings in the back of his van. We even had a court reporter. And I learned a lot of my community outreach from him. Also, as he was city attorney, often if he couldn't make an event, he would send me as his surrogate to different events in the community. Now, unfortunately, he would often call me at 4:30 for something at 5:15 in the afternoon, and I would just have an address. I had no idea what I was even going to, but I would go and then try to figure out what kind of meeting I was going to and what information the community wanted. I also was the head of the intake unit for a number of years, which is the unit that files criminal charges. So I worked with tens of thousands of people coming into our office trying to file criminal charges and working with them to try to get solutions. So that was another way I was really involved with the community.
Wow, that's impressive. Scott?
Hey, Emmanuel. My name is Scott Kirschman, and I grew up in northern Ohio, a tiny little town Huron, Ohio, with 8,000 people. After high school, I went to Ohio University for journalism, and then I went to Ohio State for law school. My dream originally was I was either going to be a film critic or a water ski instructor. It kind of got put into a different route when I was in New York City on a scholarship and got to go to an opening night of the Broadway show and met the film critic Gene Siskel. And talking to him on intermission, he said to be a good film critic, you need to be a curveball. And I said, well, I've been thinking about law school. I'm the first person in my family to go to law school. I'm still the only lawyer in my family. I said, I'm thinking about law school. He said, you should do it, because he was a philosophy major. So I went to law school, and I truly enjoyed it. When I was in law school, I actually worked at the night prosecutors program over at the city prosecutors, first as a mediation officer and then as an intake officer. And I truly loved it. You know, criminal law, you're helping at a groundwater level. You're helping people resolve and come to a resolution. After law school, I joined, it was at the time Cincinnati's biggest law firm, Frost & Jacobs. Worked there for just under 2 years, and then transitioned over to the Hamilton County Prosecutor's Office, where I worked in the civil division and did things like eminent domain and tax valuation. It was great, but I wanted to get back into the courtroom and to criminal law. So I was the first person then to go from civil and then into juvenile, and worked my way through juvenile, municipal, grand jury, and then to common pleas, where I did murders and robberies and burglaries. I did take a year off and toured with the Broadway show Les Miserables as their assistant company manager. No singing, but I can sing the entire show. And then came off the road in 2002 and joined the Franklin County Prosecutor's Office, where I am now a senior prosecutor. I do murders, robberies, and burglaries. Truly love it. Criminal justice system is where you get to take people from a place of loss and to a place of recovery. And I can tell you that definitely requires community outreach. People don't realize, they think you just issue subpoenas and people show up and then they tell the truth, but that's not how it works. You know, it takes time and trust to get people to come into court and swear to tell the truth. And a lot of times people don't want to do that. In some neighborhoods, it's looked at, even if it's a family member that you're testifying about the loss, even if your brother or sister died, that if you come into court, you get labeled, and I hate saying the word SNITCH, and that's not true. That word applies to somebody who is facing a criminal charge and is doing something for their own benefit to help them out of their own criminal system. So it is interesting. So a lot of times I'll go out to the victim, out to the witness, and that means going out in the field. And usually on Sunday mornings, that's where I was last Sunday morning. I was over on 26th Street in Linden, just south of Linden McKinley High School, talking to a witness and walking the scene to make them feel comfortable. It is about outreach, just like Bill said. You know, you have to be part of the community if you want to be effective. I truly love the job. I truly love taking people from a place of loss to a place of recovery, knowing that you can't bring back their loved one, but at least you can know that they can feel that they've been seen and that they've been heard.
Thank you. And as you know, both of you are prosecutors who try different kind of cases. A lot of people may not know the differences between misdemeanors and felonies. So I'll start with you, Bill. Can you explain what misdemeanor crimes are? Then I'll move on to you, Scott, so that you can tell us more about felonies.
Misdemeanor crimes are, frankly, it's what get most people into court. It's anything from a traffic ticket for speed to as serious as domestic violence. Our charges initially, the maximum jail time is 6 months or less. So on the surface, they are not serious charges, but obviously if you're the people that are involved in those cases, or you're the victim, or you live next door to one of these people charged, it is a serious charge to you. But on my cases, we're not looking at people getting significant amounts of prison time. The system also probably has a lot less trials than what Scott faces over at Common Pleas, because people have a lot less to lose, so they're less likely to do trials. I mean, I've probably done easily between 50 and 100,000 cases. You're not going to have that kind of volume over at the Common Pleas level, but those cases are going to be much more complicated. If we do a trial, it's usually done within 3 to 5 days, and that's usually only doing it in the afternoon. So that's the difference. Most people, if they're going to be coming to court, it will be for a misdemeanor charge.
Thank you. Scott?
Felonies start at, they're all graded. This is what I tell witnesses and family members, is that they're all graded. Like there's felony 5, there's felony 4, felony 3, felony 2, felony 1. Felony 5, and just like Bill was saying, it's 6 months for a misdemeanor. Felony 5, it's up to a year. And then felony 4, 18 months. Felony 3, it can be 3, it can be 5. It's kind of mushy, but it's generally 3. Felony 2, it's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8. Felony 3, it's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You can see how as the temperature goes up, it gets hotter and gets more serious. And then beyond that, there's unscheduled felonies, which would be things like murder, where it could be like 15 to life. There are also presumptions in there. Felony 4, felony 5, the presumption is if it's a first-time offender that they get probation. If it's felony 1 or felony 2, there's a presumption that the person goes prison. Felony 3 sits in the middle of the teeter-totter. It could go either way. Then there's also things like gun specs. And if a gun spec's on there, it makes it mandatory time that regardless if it's a plea or if it's a jury trial, the person will be going to prison. That's to reflect gun violence and the problems that creates. Unscheduled felonies would be like 15 to life. That's for murder. It's all graded to be more serious. You know, in municipal, the goal is not to be the gateway to felony. Because just like Bill said, you know, when I did municipal down in Cincinnati, it's bulk. I mean, you're doing, you know, that conveyor belt is running all the time. But you still want to make an effect and hopefully derail people out of the criminal justice system. When it gets to felony, you still want to try and give a chance. But, you know, looking at any crime, you have to look at each particular facts and not necessarily the level that it was indicted at.
Thank you. And in some communities have high level of crime. And where you have a community with high level of crimes, you also have a high level of non-cooperation with prosecution and with the police. How do you, as prosecutors, try to bridge that gap with that community to, you know, ensure trust?
Well, the first thing to do is, like, you know, I have I don't have it here, there it is. I have like a cell, you know, and the county does not pay for it. You know, on an Apple phone, you can give out your phone number and you can also set up a Google account, is to let people know I can be reached, you know, to make them feel comfortable. If you've ever been a victim of crime, it's that uncertainty, you know, is somebody listening? Does somebody care? But there is a culture you know, and this is even in Upper Arlington or Linden, where people don't want to get involved. And it has nothing to do necessarily with income level, but people don't want to get involved. But, you know, part of our job is to make people feel comfortable, to feel that it's safe. There's all sorts of precautions you can do, like bringing people to a different level. A lot of times it's setting up meetings with the defense attorney so the person doesn't have to come down and everybody can interview them as opposed to coming down for a trial so they can hear what this person has to say. But, you know, if you try and look from an empathy side of how it would be to come in to testify against a neighbor or a family member, it's hard, you know, just to try and listen and get them comfortable. And I know what I do is I go out in the field, and it could be, and like usually Sunday mornings, regardless of the neighborhood, is a good time to go out and talk to people and let them know that, you know, if you come to them, you're sending the message you care, but you're also sending the message that you'll be safe and I see you. So it's just mainly outreach.
Thank you. Bill?
I would say the same thing, particularly on misdemeanors. We're going to be going out a lot less in the field to try to track down witnesses because our charges aren't as serious. The number one thing I used to have to do, frankly, I would go to a lot of block watches and civic associations because people don't understand how the system works. So one of the things is to be a face for the system and explain to people, for instance, if they want to file criminal charges, what kind of evidence would they need? What's the difference between a misdemeanor and a felony? Also letting them know the city attorney's office, in my case, we don't handle juvenile cases. How would they file a complaint if they had a problem juvenile in their community? So it's to try to be a resource and to educate people, and also to provide them with answers on places they can go to address different types of issues. Like, for instance, if somebody's calling about, they'll say if there was an animal cruelty situation, they called animal control. That's not the proper venue. It's the Humane Society. So it's just getting that word out to people. Mine was also giving out my phone number to be a resource and an email. Now, I'm more old school. I still prefer talking to people versus doing long emails, because I think you can get a lot more back and forth and you can develop relationships with people. Also, when I would go to events, I'd always tell them, I don't handle felonies. These are what felonies are. I don't handle juveniles. These are what those are. This is what I do handle. And I also tell people, because often you go to these meetings and you have a lot of people that are very frustrated or very upset. So I will tell people, I'll come to your community, your meeting. I don't expect people to cheer and clap because I'm there. But all I ask is that they listen. And if they're frustrated and they're upset, I understand that. But I think if you constantly go out in the community and you're seen and you're known, it gives you some credibility. The other thing I would do, which is, and people would even tell me, I've never had someone tell me this before. If they call me with a problem and I tell them I don't think there is a good solution, I will tell them the truth and say, maybe you need to do this or that, but the way you're wanting to address it is not going to work. And giving them, hey, call this agency or call that number or call this, that is pawning off the problem or the citizen to someone else, particularly if you're sending them somewhere you know they're not going to be helped. The answer I always hate, they tell everybody, call legal aid. Legal aid is a great place, but they only handle limited issues and problems. And I've seen people in government service or government offices who send people to call legal aid on things that they know they do not handle. That is A, disrespectful, and B, that's sending the problem to someone else to deal with. I think if you're honest with people and you're upfront, you establish credibility, and I think it's better for everyone in the long run. And that's the way I've always done things, and that's how we always handled it. So I always be, if I'm called and can you come to a community group, if there's more than one person, I will come on my own time at night, weekends, I don't care. Or by phone call, always trying to be as accessible as possible. I had a rule to try to return my calls within 24 to 48 hours. I'd like to say it's always 24, but sometimes you get too busy, but always to make sure to follow up. How many times have I returned a call and they're like, you returned my phone call? I'm like, you left a message. That's what we're supposed to do. And a lot of people in government service just do not do that. And I just find that to be absolutely unacceptable.
I agree with what Bill exactly said, that sometimes you get the feeling that they just want to move people out of the lobby. And there's been times when people have showed up at the county prosecutor's office and they said, well, the city prosecutor sent me here. And I know when I handle that, the first thing I do is call Bill and I'm like, did you guys send this person over? And it's usually no. It's no, they did not. In fact, it's always no. But, it's also situational too with talking with the person when you go out in the field. I mean, there's been times that I've been knocking on the door and I can smell pot, and the person doesn't want to enter the door. Like Bill said, just be truthful with them. I can smell it. I don't care. I'm not a police officer. Trust me, it's sort of like, if people are worried about, if they have a misdemeanor warrant and they don't want to show up, that can be worked out. It can be addressed. And if they have immigration issues and they're worried that if they come to court, that it's going to create some deportation issue, that can be worked out. The main thing is like Bill said, is to create trust with people.
Thank you. And both of you have been canvassing the community for at least for maybe 10 months now or longer, campaigning for judge, and you've been getting to meet the people, sometimes one-on-one, sometimes as a group. What are those things you've learned from the community or the people that you've met? Scott.
I think people are, interested to see, somebody who's going for political office out in the field. And it's been interesting, people respond, as opposed to just, being on social media or a mailer or an email, but going out into the field, people respond to that, and talking to them, and also mainly listening to them. That there are lots of issues you can learn just by going out in the field. You also learn here in Franklin County that there's a lot of different communities here. I had never been to Groveport before, but what a lovely little burg down there with, they had the, I think is it Bill, is the Apple Butter Day Festival?
Apple Butter Day Festival, yes.
It's quaint. I mean, you could think, well, I want to go to New England for some quaint little rustic, pioneer type village. No, it's just, a 25-minute drive heading down to the southeast side of, beautiful Franklin County. It's been a joy. I've truly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I will say for me, it's actually particularly because the nature of who I worked for politically at the city attorney's office and having been out in the community for over 25 years, to a large extent, it's like been a reunion tour for me. Me and Scott will do a lot of events together. A lot of the candidates do, and it is very seldom will go somewhere where I don't already know someone. And that's because, obviously the way the structure of the past job I had for the last 25 years, I've been doing a lot of outreach. So in that respect, I can go into a room and I already know people. And it's been really good for me because a lot of people are like, we're glad to see you here. It's about time that we've seen you run for office. We've been waiting for you to do this. So for me, it's been more of a reunion tour. You still learn new things on the trail. And as Scott says, you realize it's a very large county with a lot of different communities. I've worked hard over the years to be in all those communities, but there's still new people to meet, new issues to confront. And again, I think it's also important, even as a candidate, to establish credibility. I think it's easier to establish credibility when you're a government employee versus a candidate, because when you're out campaigning, people are like, oh, he or she wants my vote. And I've even stressed to them on the campaign trail, judge me not by what I say, but judge me based on what I have traditionally done for the community. And I also tell them, I plan on winning this race, and if I do, I should be here again. I don't want a situation, oh, we saw Bill Hedrick, he must be up for re-election next year. I see that too often, and I think as a government official, you have a responsibility to go into those communities and go back. So, and you're judged by continuing to go back. You don't go back and say, hey, here, I took a picture with so-and-so, and you don't show up again. That is not how I want to do things. It's not how I did things as a government official, and it's not how I want to do things as an elected official. So I'm even telling people on the trail, when I win this race, and I hope to win this race, if you don't see me in your community, call me to task, and I will come there. I always use this line too, particularly if it's an event that has food, I'm more than happy to show up.
It's all about credibility and food.
It is.
And so, do you have occasions where you have potential voters coming to you and telling you about their displeasure with either the justice system or the courts or the prosecutor's office on the campaign trail?
Not really. I mean, people have sometimes talked about, there's been occasion where they've talked about, a family member that they don't believe was treated fairly. And I usually try and find out if it's a pending case or if it's something that's been resolved. But in generally, no. But I think they're mainly just surprised to see people running for political office out picking up trash. So
I think the biggest issue sometimes, you always get this with a lawyer, and I'm sure you get it, is like, doctors, everybody gets this. Everybody wants free legal advice. Yeah. And what they don't realize is half the time they come up with, these are areas of law I don't even practice in. So I have a phrase, I don't represent you, but if you get free legal advice, you get your money's worth. You get what you pay for. Free is what it's worth. But I try to direct people on places they can go. Honestly, most people, a lot of legal answers can actually, believe it or not, can be found on the internet. Particularly in criminal law, a lot of defense attorneys have outstanding websites that lay out the basic elements of the law that are written in layman's terms that most people can understand. So I always tell people, Google search things, and you often can get very good information.
We were at an event last Saturday, and a man came up to me and said, "You're a lawyer, right?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "How do I get a good malpractice lawyer?" And I thought he meant legal malpractice. And I'm like, is it, is it pending? And then I said, "Wait a minute, is this for medical malpractice?" He said, "Oh, yes, yes." So, then I could give him some numbers of where to start to look. But Bill is right. People do ask us, in passing legal questions, and it's all good.
Yeah. Thank you. And what have you learned about yourself going out to the community and meeting people?
Oh, I love it.
Bill?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm like Scott. It's something I've always enjoyed and I like doing. Obviously, when I get more comfortable with people, more of my personality will come out. But when I first go, everybody's like, he's a little uptight. But I always tell people I may appear uptight, but I'm there for a reason. I mean, years ago, I had a citizen come up to me. I went to a citizens forum, and she goes, well, she was upset because I had been falling asleep during the meeting. If it's a long meeting, I fall asleep. I nap off because, and she's like, but I said, look, you feel that I'm not being disrespectful. I'm actually here on my own time. I'm not being paid any extra due. That I'm here because I care. So sometimes, particularly, it was a part of a meeting, people were talking about speed bumps in the community or something, and I'd worked like a 12-hour day. So I probably wasn't my best. So I think that's one of the things I've had to learn. Again, I try to work in the long term to establish credibility because I may not always have the glitz and glamour when they first meet me. But I think if you keep going, and I develop relationships with people, and I've had people in communities I am personally friends with. For example, in the Hilltop, Lisa Boggs is involved in a lot of neighborhood cleanups, a lot of work with. She does a Halloween thing with the kids over there every year. I've helped her on multiple things over the years. We're friends. I'm friends with a lot of community leaders. I've met people for lunch or dinner outside of a context of work because we've developed a friendship over time, and I treasure those friendships. So I think, and the campaign, it's been the same way. I make new friends all the time, and I value those friendships.
Thank you. Scott?
I'm loving it, and it's so much fun. Meeting people, discovering the little neighborhoods all over Franklin County. And I will say, like when Bill and I walk into, somewhere like the Hilltop, everyone knows him, and it's wonderful, to have somebody there who can, introduce you to people like Lisa. Hell, a couple of months ago, we were over there in the Hilltop, and we drove by, and there was a guy was raising money for his son to go to the Junior Olympics and hosting a fish dinner, and we said, hey, it's raising money for a good thing. We'll be back. And his fish dinner started at 4:00. And by the way, it was an amazing fish dinner. The only thing you could complain about that the portions were way too big. And we said, we'll come back. And then when we came back, I think he was so surprised that, like, you both came back. Like, yeah, we said we'd come back, and it was fun, and it was great. And, getting out there and meeting people, it does show that we're all in this together. And if you just reach out, they can't answer the door unless you knock. So, it's been a joy. It really has been a joy. I can't think of any negative things to say about it.
Thank you. And the people get to have that connection with you.
Yeah. Bill, do you remember that fish dinner?
I do. And there, no, it was a very positive experience. I think people are surprised when you do show up. And again, I think it's important. One, you show up and you're authentic, and two, that you come back. And I think people see that and they're very pleasantly surprised, and they tell their family and their friends. And honestly, that's what government service should be. And I think it's sad that when we do things that I think we should normally do, they're considered exceptional by people because they just don't see that from other people. Now, granted, a lot of, in defense, politicians are like other people. They have families, they're busy, but we have signed on to be a public servant. And in my mind, that's just not being in the courtroom. That's also being out in the community, because you can educate people. And also, again, they're the ones who hired me by voting for me. So I owe my job to them. And I also tell people, if one's going to run for re-election, it's just so much easier if you've always been out in the community. Again, I don't want to be that person. I show up and I'm like, the dude must be running for re-election because I ain't seen him for 3 years or 4 years or whatever. I just don't think that's acceptable.
Thank you. And prosecutors and public defenders, they're like two sides to the same coin. Both are public officials and both also serve the community. Do they work together to ensure some kind of a balance in justice within the community? Scott.
I can answer that. I work with public defenders every day, and a lot of times, they're the best lawyer, the defense lawyer in the courtroom. They've got hustle. They also know the judges. They've established relationships with the judges and the judges' staff. Remember though, the public defender, their job is to, represent their client. That's their main focus. And the public defenders have those skills and have that history in knowing the courtroom and that familiarity. But, as a prosecutor, your job is not to represent the victim. It's to represent the state. But you also have your job, to represent the state. Follow Marcy's law and the victim's law. Work with the police, work with the judge. Our goal, the judge wants to get, either a verdict that is fair, and impartial, and a result of fair and impartial deliberation. But the judge wants to get a conviction or a not guilty that reflects that. The prosecutor should, and this should be paramount, is that you do not do anything that would result in if it is a conviction, something where you're violating a person's constitutional or any other type of rights. So if you're going to end up with a conviction, say like from a jury trial, you don't want to have to do it again. That's the worst thing, to have a case come back for retrial, which means you have to revisit one that you thought was done. So the prosecutor's goal is, work with the defense attorney, work with the victims, work with the police officers, work with the court. If there is a conviction, make sure it's a conviction that is within the law, because you do not want to try it again. I can tell you, public defenders are amazing, and they got hustle, and they also have creativity. And it's kind of interesting, too, that, with this whole restorative justice, you see this with defense attorneys and with public defenders, is that oftentimes now they're working with the victims to try and get the victims happy as a positive result for their clients, which is really exciting to see, because as a prosecutor, my focus has always been about getting the victims through the system. And you're seeing defense attorneys do that too.
Bill, you have any issue?
I've always had a very good relationship with the public defenders, and obviously my role is very different than theirs, but I have a great respect for the work that they do. Often we can go in a community, traditionally, if people, if you go to a party or something, you say you're a prosecutor, most people will have a positive reaction to that. Public defenders often don't get that. Because there's a perception out there that, look, these people are trying to get people off that are guilty and they're part of the problem. They're not. They're defending the people's constitutional rights. So they're in a difficult position. Also, I feel bad for them because there are some outstanding public defenders that I think do great jobs. And because they're free, they don't cost money, some of their own clients don't often give them the respect that they deserve, because they'll come in and make these comments, I have a public pretender, or something that's offensive, when they have often a very, very good attorney who effectively advocates for them. So the poor public defender gets attacked by, the prosecutor attacks them, the victims aren't happy with them, and often their own clients are beating up on them. I mean, I think I've seen defendants be much meaner to their public defenders than they are to me as the prosecutor. I check them in, and they'll come up to me and they'll complain about their attorney. I'm trying to get them convicted, sometimes even put them in jail, and they're nicer to me than they are to their own attorney. So in that respect, the system would not work. Particularly, I think both court systems are the same in that overwhelmingly the defendants in our systems are represented by public defenders. And over time, most of us on both sides, we have very good working relationships, particularly in the municipal side, because we have too many cases. So we need to work together to get them through. And the deal is to try to do an equitable solution that's best for everybody involved. But again, the public defender represents the defendant. So, I have parents of a defendant call, my son or daughter needs to be in drug treatment. The public defender can suggest that to their client, but ultimately, if their client doesn't want to do that, they cannot make them. They represent that client. And I think that's difficult for people to understand. I mean, I saw an example once where a public defender represented somebody and somebody started denouncing them on social media and contacted their parents and did these horrible things. And I'm like, they were doing their job. And whether that job's always popular or not, and the prosecutor can be the same too. Sometimes the prosecutor has everyone dislike them as well. But we all have a role to play and we all work together. And I think the key is to have respect for one another. And I think most of us do.
They say like, well, he's got a free attorney. That's kind of offensive, when they say that. I know that every public defender has my cell, and if a public defender calls me and says, hey, there's a problem on a case, like something wasn't done or the person should be out on bond, I know if they're calling that they have credibility and that they would only be.
Oh, I think his internet has problems.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I could jump in since Scott sort of froze
Yes.
until he can get back in. But I also think an important thing as a prosecutor. All right.
Yeah,
I'll finish and get back to you. But
I don't know what happened with my internet. But there's a TV show that was recommended called How to Get Away with Murder, and I started watching the first season. And like episode 3 or 4, somebody was cracking on public defenders, and then I just turned it off. Like, I'm done. I can't be a viewer of this show. So, sorry about that. I don't know if something happened with my internet.
Yes, I think something happened to you. Bill, you ran for office 17 years ago,
yes,
and you're doing it again. What are those lessons you learned from that first foray into campaigning and that you're applying to your current campaign?
Well, one thing, last time when I ran, I was one of the youngest candidates that was running, and this time I'm not the oldest. There's 2 or 3 candidates older than me, but I am one of the older candidates. But there's a lot of things that have changed. Politically speaking, the county was much more Republican in 2004 than it is now, and I'm running as a Democratic candidate. So that is helpful. 2, social media is now out there, and we can do a lot more using social media. Like I could attend 10 events in 2004, and unless someone saw me there, they wouldn't realize I was out there working. So it gets the message out more. And, I've also had 17 years of constantly going in the community and then building on the reputation I had from that time period. So I think it's made me much more better because I have a lot more connections, and I think I've had a lot more life experiences. And then also, I'm currently only doing this. So I'm not working all day and then trying to go out and campaign. That's a very difficult thing. It's tiring for me just doing this. So I have great respect for the bulk of the other candidates who are working a full-time job and running at the same time. It's very difficult because there's just a lot of things to go to. This year's a little bit easier in the respect because last year COVID sort of shut everything down. This year's more of a hybrid. So we have some Zoom things and then we have some in-person things. But if we hadn't had the situation, unfortunately, with COVID, we would probably have 2 or 3 times the amount of candidates, events, and things that we've versus what we're doing now.
That's great. And Scott, this is your first time running, and it seems like you are enjoying the campaign. Do you feel like maybe you should have done this earlier?
Well, I think everything has a plan. It's you're ready when you're ready, and I'm loving it right now. I think my skill sets, my engagement. I was in a Democrat working in a Republican office, so that was not an option. But I believe everything is in its own time and in its own right time. I'm loving it, and I'm focusing upon 2021, so loving it. But thank you.
Yeah, and I see both of you, you are readers. You know, you used to work in the library. You're a journalist, and
Mhm.
so I'm gonna ask you, what is your favorite book and why? Bill,
That's
since you're
always
ready.
a hard one for me because I usually only like nonfiction. But
Mm-hmm.
I will say I'll go back to a book of my youth. And I originally only read this when I was a junior in high school because it was censored or banned, so you weren't supposed to read it. So J.D. Salinger's Catcher in the Rye. Um, I think it's a very good book. It's been a while since I've read it. I keep a copy. Actually, during the pandemic, me and Scott lived near each other, and we often would take walks. I actually gave him a copy of the book and recommended that he read it. And I mean, it's dealing with someone who is basically spiraling with the mental health issues and how this young man is trying to navigate this system. And again, it's like set in the 50s, but it's a very good book about youth. It's about mental health, and there's a lot of other underlying issues in that. So I think it's a powerful book, and I think that's why it's still extremely popular. And it's controversial because the way the language flows, because it it speaks like the person that's narrating it, and it wasn't censored. It was spoken in a way that a young person in that time period would talk, but it's one that you can even read now and you can still feel the power of the words and the feelings. So that is my favorite book as far as fiction. I don't really have a favorite on nonfiction. I was a big I did like John Lewis's biography of his life. I think was extremely powerful. So I think that's one, if I had to pick a nonfiction book, that's my favorite. And I did get to meet him and have an autographed copy, which means a lot to me. I wish we still had the cell phones back in the day when I met him, because I would love to have had a picture with him, because he is one of my heroes and it was just an outstanding person.
Thank you.
Emmanuel, I did read Catcher in the Rye long ago, like in seventh grade, and I thought it was a great book. But Bill is right; he recommended. It's different when you read it when you're 58 years old. It's a different perspective, and it was completely enjoyable. And during COVID, Bill and I did solve all the world problems and talk about books while we were doing our 6 miles a day. I was looking over. I collect books. Can I step away for 1 second? And I'm going to grab a book. I'll be right back. I'm just grabbing. So, my favorite book. I do have a great recent book I just read, and I happen to have it right here. It's called.
Oh, that's my book.
That's not pandering at all.
No, this is true. This is true. This is a great book. When people talk
Thank you.
about the American dream, you know, and you coming here, you know, and trying to make your way, and you know that it's a rigged system. You know, this says, no, I can do it.
And,
When you hear
and
all of
by the way, what's the title of that book?
it's called The Flavor of Favor, Quest for an American Dream, a memoir. If I was a book editor and I was in journalism, I would change the title to $48. And to figure out why, you have to read the book. Because for me, that was the tipping point. Emmanuel, do you know what I mean?
Yes.
$48. But if I were to say my favorite book, so I just grabbed a couple. The one I recommend, and I actually went and bought a signed copy of it from Frank Clement. It's A Prayer for Owen Meany. It has to do with, it's a book you don't want to give spoilers. There was a terrible movie made about it, not called Owen Meany, a couple years ago. But if you see this book, and if somebody is reading this book, you know, I've read this book probably 5 times, but people want to come up and talk about it, because it truly goes to the nature of faith. You know, faith in people, faith in humanity, faith in you know, of purpose of every person. This is a wonderful book. That's the one I recommend. For nonfiction, I recommend, and I've given out so many copies of this, is When Breath Becomes Air. The little slim book. It won't ruin it to know that the author is terminal. It's a true story. When he's writing this, he is dying. I truly recommend this, because this helps you truly live in the moment. This is a great book. But for a book itself, the book that if my house was on fire I would grab is just above my head. It was a book that James Baldwin wrote, And then he appeared at Firelands Community College right near my hometown. And I was 16 years old. I asked my mom, and she took me there, and I got to meet him. And he signed the book. And then I was noticing that he didn't put my name like how my grandma writes it. So I came back and said, Mr. Baldwin, would you write my name on it? He said, well, it won't be then of much value as just my name. And I said, I'm never giving up this book. I'm never going to sell this. So then he wrote For Scott Peace. So this is the book I would grab if the house was on fire. But I love books. I can talk about books forever. I worked in a library all 4 years through high school. It's a joy, and I read every night before bed. So if I were to give advice to anybody, watching, read more books.
Great. Thank you. And I remember reading When Breath Becomes Air. Oh, wow. Very, very touching memoir. Yeah. And what would you like the people out there to remember about you when they go to the polls? Some of them have already started voting. Bill?
I'll go first. I mean, I'll just reiterate what I've already said. I'm doing this because I want to do public service, and I have a high standard for what that public service is. If you want someone who's going to be trying to work for you and do the best you can for the community, who really cares, then I think I'm the candidate for you. I'm not going to lobby for your vote now and again disappear. There are things I want to do. There's things you can't promise as a judge. I can only promise to be fair with the cases that are before me, but I also have a mission to continue to serve the community outside the bench. And those are things I'm wanting to do, I'm hoping to do. And even if I weren't to lose this election, it's a way of life for me. It's what I do, but I like to do that as a judge.
That I'm authentic, that what you see is what you get. That, like Bill said, I don't believe in performative politics. I don't believe in transactional politics. Talk is talk. But actually going out there in the field and something as important as environmental court, that determines the health, the safety of our neighborhoods. We want to have lively sidewalks in all our neighborhoods when people can, bond together. If anything in this past year, we're all in this together. And what your neighbor does will affect you, not just your property values, but your quality of life. And with environmental court, whether it's abandoned buildings or hoarding or animal abuse, that affects everybody. Because if it's not addressed quickly and fairly, then the neighborhood suffers. I hope people see that authenticity. I am in it for the long haul. The idea of improvement. My campaign is rooted in, and you'll see it in the logo, is in community.service. It's something I believed in as a prosecutor. It's something that I would do as a judge. And I appreciate the question. Thank you, Emmanuel.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you both for coming on to the show today. I know you guys are returning guests, and I also know that you're very busy, but you took the time out to have this conversation with me and the community. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And for those of you watching or listening to this program, thank you for joining us. Until next time, stay safe.